Alrighty, welcome to Mornings with Mike. It is May 14th, and it is a beautiful, bright, sunny day. The sky is blue, not a cloud in the sky, at least from where I'm sitting. And yeah, it's a great day to be alive. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us here. We'll get right into some stuff. Since we've got Rudi Kohler with us here today. He's the chairman of the Wasatch County Democratic Party, and definitely want to get as much of what he has to say on today. So we're going to kind of zip through some stuff real quick. Talk about the traffic and weather real quick. Traffic looks great up and down the canyons all around. Doesn't seem to be too much to worry about there, so your commute should be fine if you're still driving. Weather. We're going to be warming up pretty dramatically through the week. Today we're going to have a high of 67. By Friday it'll be up to 79 and kind of top off in the high 70s for the weekend. So should be beautiful, mostly sunny, and should be hopefully probably about the best weekend we've had so far this year as far as weather goes. So that's great. A couple of points of interest I wanted to go over real quick. We have 5 laws here in Utah that went into effect under the that were passed in the last legislative session that people ought to be paying attention to a little bit. We've already talked about on Monday. We talked about the new cell phone laws. So just be aware that if you're looking down, you may end up finding yourself pulled over and it's pretty easy to prove that you've been driving and texting or checking out the internet or something like that. So be very aware of that. And another interesting law that was passed is that went into effect yesterday is that in the state of Utah, the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise known as drones, has been dramatically restricted. Law enforcement will be required to get a warrant to use those things in their efforts to put people under surveillance and things like that. So I think that's a good thing. Those things can be anywhere as small as I've seen some as small as insects, and obviously some as large as small airliners. So there's a pretty wide range of things, but that's those unmanned aerial vehicles. That's going to bring into question, and already has, a lot of our privacy issues, because those things can fly kind of wherever you want them to fly, and you probably start seeing those pop up with paparazzi a lot and things like that. I mean, they can fly them wherever they want, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, people can fly those into your backyard and take video of you and your family and everything else, and take pictures and whatever they want to do. So, yeah, that's a pretty interesting thing. Don't really need to touch too much on this, but I guess it's necessary to let people. Well, I'm not even going to worry about that one. We'll let people look that one up. Voter list, though. They have passed some legislation to restrict access to voter lists a little bit in the name of in the name of privacy, and you can purchase a list of the voter names and addresses and things like that, but only certain groups are going to be able to do that. Political parties, healthcare providers will be able to access birth dates associated. Obviously, there are lots of concerns about being able to go buy one of these lists and then just use that to steal identities and everything, and that identity theft has just spiraled out of control. In my opinion, it's unbelievably easy to steal a person's identity, and I was a victim just a couple of months ago. Personally, I got a letter. I got a bill in the mail from Verizon Wireless, and it said thanks for signing up with us, and this is what you owe us for the phones that you signed up for, and the phone numbers and everything. And I mean, it's pretty surreal when something like that happens to you, because you're just like, how is this possible? So I called in, and they're like, yeah, we have your social security number. You called in, you signed up, and so my first reaction was, well, where'd you send the stuff? Let me go find them. And they, of course, wouldn't tell me. They're like, no, we can't let you go vigilante on them. And so that was shut down. But there's no recourse. And they said, you gotta go get a report from the police, file a police report, and send us your information, and we'll cancel it and everything. But beyond that, there's nothing I can do. The police don't have the manpower or anything to follow up on stuff like that. And, unless it's on a large scale, I don't think most people do much about that. But anyway, so, in the name of protecting people's privacy, they've changed some of the rules regarding that. And then, the last one, last year, if you remember, there was an incident, or a couple of incidences, I believe, where, students and faculty were exposed to carbon monoxide poisoning in schools, and so they passed legislation requiring, and it's interesting that this was not already required, but that all schools are now required to have carbon monoxide monitoring and detectors and things like that in the school. It's pretty interesting to me that wasn't already a requirement. But all right, so that's basically kind of some of the basic stuff that's going on right now, and we're going to get right into this. Rudy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Mike.
So you apparently were on this station for a number of years, and so people should recognize your voice pretty well.
Right. I was on for about 4 years on the Impact program with Bob Wren and Paul Royal, and it made for some very interesting discussions.
I can imagine. Well, that's great. We appreciate you taking some time, and so you are the chairman of the Wasatch County Democratic Party.
Right.
And last week we had Aaron Gabrielson, the Republican Party chair. And heard from him a little
Aaron.
bit.
He's a real gentleman, and although we disagree on a number of issues, but I certainly respect him as an individual and consider him a friend.
That's great. That's great. Well, that's what we should all be working toward is having respect for each other in all aspects, and not respectfully disagree. We can respectfully disagree and not develop the hate and the anger.
Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could do this at higher levels of government?
Yeah, it would be.
Just be able to pick up the phone and talk about an issue that's of concern to two individuals.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's tough, man. Politics, they're pretty brutal.
Good subject, dysfunctional government.
Yeah, it's and it'll always be that way to an extent. Hopefully, we can find ways to work together a little bit better for the common good. And
well, the shame of it is it seems like, at least at the congressional level, we used to be able to do a much better job than we are now.
I agree.
I mean, people could just get together and, as I mentioned, just pick up the phone or have lunch with their opponents and work out a compromise. But now with this deadlock, nothing's happening.
Right. And we've been, I guess, in my opinion, it kind of came after the 2000 elections, I guess. I think people were so upset about the way that turned out that the parties really started pulling away from each other. and then it's just been compounded over time.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. It got more intense then, but I would put it closer to around '92 when things really started to.
It was that far back.
Well, in my mind, I'm a bit older than you are, so perhaps I have a bit more perspective. But that's when I started seeing the extreme partisanship start, and there were flashes in which people could get together and work out things, but it started to get. I think the high point in our ability to work together was in the 70s.
Yeah,
that seemed to be the high point.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's I don't know what the answer is, because everybody certainly feels like their opinion is the right one, and yeah, it's just and with our political process now, if you are willing to reach across the aisle, you most likely will not hold your office for very long.
That's exactly right. There's a stigmatization that to compromise is a bad word.
Right.
I've seen that even in the use of, you used to think that tolerance was a good word. Well, it's not so much a good word in the minds of a lot of people now.
Yeah.
But the and being a member of a political party, I really think that the politics have become so strong that it's preventing people from voting and doing the things that they personally think is right. They feel that the pressures are so strong they have to vote with their party. And that I see is a big problem. We've gotten too partisan, and it's to our detriment.
Yeah, it's this whole concept that that our politicians are not allowed to learn from past mistakes. We've coined this term from, I think, that probably really became prevalent in the 2004 elections, but we use this term flip-flopper, and obviously if someone is back and forth on an issue on a regular basis currently, then that's a problem, because they're obviously just pandering. But if someone believed a certain way 20 years ago and now they think differently, how it's great that they've learned from their mistake. It's great that they have evolved, they've progressed, they've educated themselves better, but time and time again, we see in political races that when people are running for office, if one of the candidates believed a certain way 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they have documentation, he said this in a speech, or he did this in an interview, and now he's saying this, it's like, well, you never learned from your past?
It's become political suicide to deviate too far from the party line.
Right.
The parties will allow a certain amount of deviation, but if you get too far out, then it just doesn't work. And I'm talking on a bipartisan basis. This is true with the Republicans and the Democrats. We used to have a group of Democrats that were becoming increasingly strong, called the Blue Dog Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
And these were moderate Democrats, and they would often vote Republican. Jim Matheson is an example of a Blue Dog Democrat. A lot of Democrats, don't like what he's doing, and a lot of Republicans don't like. But he's pretty much an independent thinker. And to the party's frustration, will often go his own way, or what he believes his constituents favor. We've lost that. We've lost a lot of that, and it's on both sides. I don't even know if there is a Blue Dog Caucus anymore. It used to be about I think 24 or so members of Congress. I'm not sure it still exists.
Yeah.
Most of these people just got voted out by the extremes.
Right, right. Yeah, and we're seeing a real power struggle still within the Republican Party, and it really has not resolved itself. Out in California right now, the Republican Party has two people running for the nomination for governor, and despite backing of pretty much every prominent Republican you can think of, and despite lots and lots of money behind the one candidate who is decidedly moderate, his extreme challenger is right there. I mean, he's leading him.
Sure.
And it's the Republican Party, I believe, is going to have a real struggle for quite a while. Until they have been out of power for a long time, when
Sure.
they don't, because if they don't have a seat at the table, they're gonna finally eventually decide to change things.
Well, even House Speaker Boehner has publicly voiced his frustration at the extreme wing of the party.
Oh, the extreme side of the Republican Party really, really dislikes House Speaker Boehner, and it's I mean, in the last election, in the last presidential election, you saw a very decidedly moderate Mitt Romney do everything he could to try to allow get the Republican Party to allow him to be their candidate.
Right.
And it was a fight of, you're not conservative enough, and
I think he lost a lot of support from people because he was considered more of a moderate.
Absolutely.
But then again, you look at he didn't lose by a landslide in the traditional foreign concept of the term. It wasn't an 80-20 type of loss. It was he lost by several percentage points.
Right.
So it shows that a lot of Americans do respect a person that is more moderate.
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
he actually got
interesting to have an election between Rand Paul and Elizabeth Warren. Talk about the two extremes.
Right. Yeah.
That,
it's a shame that we're not allowing our politicians to have principles. To have personal convictions. It's, if you don't toe the party line, that we're not interested, and it's a problem.
One of the things I had suggested to Aaron Gabrielson, my counterpart, is that county elections be nonpartisan at the county council level. Let's just focus on electing the best people for the job, rather than the party that they represent. The Democrats being in a minority position, we've got some people out there that feel that are very well qualified for some of the jobs, but they're afraid to run because they don't want to run with a D after their name.
Right.
In a strong Republican county. But yet a lot of people would vote for these people if they chose to run for office. And it's a shame we're losing some good people just because of partisan politics. I was unsuccessful in convincing, and I'm not sure, we might even be bumping into state law, but I was unconvinced, couldn't convince Aaron to at least push for a less partisan role in county politics.
Well, if you ask me, we already kind of have a somewhat nonpartisan situation going on in this county. And when I say that, what I mean is I believe there are a lot of people with an R behind their name that don't necessarily support a lot of the party platform. And I mean, I understand what you're saying is if you do go run, I mean, you're going to lose a lot of votes just by party ticket, straight ticket votes.
That is a real problem in my opinion. What I would like to see, and again, we're probably going to run into at least laws, if not Constitution, but suppose you went to the ballot and there were names on the ballot. And the names were organized either randomly or they were organized alphabetically, but there was no party affiliation on the names.
Mm-hmm.
Now, wouldn't the voter have to know a little bit more about the person and not just vote straight D or straight R?
Absolutely.
And yet, I don't think something like this is ever going to happen. But we do need a more educated voter and one that isn't just going to follow a party line.
Right. I agree with you, and it's frustrating when you look back at the beginning of our political process here in the United States. Look back to the early presidential elections. They had established parties, but the top two vote getters became the president and the vice president.
Sure.
Now, can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine a White House right now with Barack Obama as the president and Mitt Romney as the vice president?
You know, it's funny that I could argue both sides
Yeah.
of that position, but in many countries that is the case.
Right.
That your person who comes in second has the second most powerful position. We have a winner take all type of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And if theoretically, per our Constitution, you could have 49% of people with zero vote at all levels of government.
Right.
It is theoretically possible. 49% of the people could be disenfranchised with our form of government. In other parties or in other countries, you have a parliamentarian type of system, which assures a representation from a minority.
Yeah.
Now, there's all different kinds of flavors
Yeah.
of that. But it is frustrating to where you can have somebody who is so popular, but not quite as popular as the next guy, end up with zero power. And Romney's, any of our losers in presidential elections are an example of that.
Yeah.
They could have either been the leader of the wealthiest country in the world at the moment, anyway, or have no job at all.
Yeah.
That's the alternative.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and I mean, what's driven me crazy in the past? I can think back very specifically to I believe it was was it I think it was Bill Clinton's first election.
92.
He won with, I think it was something like 48 or 47% or something like that of the vote, because we had three people vying, and it may have been his re-election campaign, but essentially over half of the country did not want him as president, and he was our president. I mean, what kind of sense does that make? And not to say that if the third party hadn't been in there, he wouldn't have picked up the necessary votes to get over a majority. But that drives me crazy that any politician would win an election with less than half of the people wanting that person to be the
Well,
leader.
we've even got to be careful when we say half of the people, because you're really talking about half of the people who voted.
Well, yeah, of course, but
So-
we,
so-
I mean, there's,
Right. So it
there's
could
nothing we're
be
going to be able to do about
considerably
that.
less than half the people.
Well, of course.
and
there's,
the same thing happened in 2000.
yeah, exactly.
So we have the
Oh yeah, it was like 48 to 49 or something.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and I forget the third person's unsafe at any speeds. What's his name? Anyway, the third person
I'm not
who
sure.
was running as an extreme progressive took a lot of the votes away from Al Gore.
Yeah.
So and look how close that was. And again, that was a winner take all.
Right.
So there's something to be said for, but now we're getting into really the fundamentals of the Constitution,
Sure.
of how we do it. But there's a number of other ways of doing it that are successful, and the parliamentarian system is one of those ways. Most countries in the world have parliaments,
Right.
and
Help
we
our
don't.
help our listeners understand the difference between the way our government is run and a parliamentary system.
Well, in a parliamentarian system, you have a representative. If you get 40% of the votes, you're going to have 40% of the members in Parliament. Here in our country, if you get 40% of the vote across all of the congressional elections, you'll have 0%.
Right.
So 40% of the people, or anything less than the winner gets, is going to have no representation.
Right.
Now, fortunately, because of randomness, we don't end up in this extreme case.
Well, and we're a
but it
very,
can
very
happen.
sure. I think what makes the United States a little bit different is we're such a large country with people spread out over such a large area, and so you have different opinions that can remain strong in certain parts of the country while they would be overrun in others, and so that allows us to have that mix still. I mean, we've all seen the red and blue map of the United States, and the population centers are typically heavily blue, and then you get into the rural areas and everything is red. And so we're still able to maintain that sort of balance because we're so spread out.
Well, I would argue that when the Constitution was written, this was not on the minds of the founding fathers, that we were going to be as large.
Yeah.
We were a lot smaller then.
Of course.
And then I would call up an example such as Ukraine. There's a small country, but with some very clear differences of opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
So it isn't just the size of the country is where I'm coming from.
Let's talk about Ukraine for just a minute here. It's not a local issue, but that's fine. We need to know what's going on in the world now. Obviously, the USSR was a very large and powerful government for a long time, and when Gorbachev came to power, he eventually allowed Germany to reunite and tried to take the USSR from a communist socialist government to
he let all the satellite nations choose their own destiny.
Right. And so that's how we get countries like Ukraine and
Bulgaria, Romania,
Yugoslavia, and all of the different.
Right.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And now things have not really gotten any better or worse for the USSR since that. I mean, now we have Russia and we have all these separate little countries. Things kind of still just suck for them, unfortunately. And I think that's more about rampant corruption than it is anything else.
Yeah, there was a tremendous amount of corruption. Ukraine is going through, and I have a bit of a perspective on this, and that two of our close friends were Ukrainian citizens, and they just moved last week to Montreal to get away from the turmoil.
Oh, smart.
But when you hear about, whether it's Yulia Tymoshenko or whether it's Yankovic and such, the governments were very different, but the corruption still exists.
Right, exactly.
So we have a situation now where the East, and you could argue the South, and certainly Crimea, would like to annex themselves with Russia for whatever reasons. We would consider, why would they want to do that? And I can give you all kinds of reasons why they personally would like to do that.
Sure.
But the point is we should act in our strategic interests. And do we have a strategic interest in the nation of Ukraine?
Right.
We have no specific alliances with Ukraine. We're appalled by the bloodshed, although, on an international scale of bloodshed,
pretty small.
It's still pretty small. My personal feeling is that let the provinces each decide, let them vote, province by province, what they want to do.
Sure.
Will that lead probably to a divided Ukraine? Yes, it will. But it's kind of like if you've got a tumor and there's, you could die from that tumor, or you could have it removed. And if you have it removed, you're a healthier person. The eastern part of Ukraine is Ukraine's tumor.
Right.
It is. They're not going to get along. They never have. They're very different thinking between the East and the West. Let the eastern part do what they want to do, and the western part of Ukraine, the pro-EU part of Ukraine, will be stronger because of it.
Yeah.
And I think Russia would accept that. Whether the U.S. or the EU will, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the other side of that argument, to an extent, is that right now you have a situation where you have Russian troops on the ground in the Crimea. And
they have annexed the Crimea. It's more than that. It's a part of Russia.
Right. But before they did that, though, you had Russian troops on the ground. And this brings me back to something I was going to say earlier about not enough people in the United States vote. You have a real difficulty in how legitimate a vote really can be. In North Korea, they have a vote for a president.
No, it's a farce.
It's a farce, of course. And because, and I saw a joke recently that said, the ballot for the vote for president was Kim Jong-un, and his challenger was or else.
That's cute.
And and so it's great, the idea of voting, but if you've got a couple of Russian troops stand outside the voting booth with AK-47s on their shoulder, and it's you question the validity of it's hard to vote the way you want to vote.
Yeah, the Crimea was kind of an extreme example.
I agree.
Number one is it was a part of the Soviet Union until
Right.
1954, when Khrushchev, in a flippant moment, thinking that the Soviet Union would never dissolve, said, "Okay, you can have the Crimea to Ukraine." But the fact is Ukraine was so much an integral part of the Soviet Union that it was just it was like splitting up a county here in the U.S. It was not a major decision.
Yeah.
Anyway, the people in the Crimea are consider themselves Russian. Now, whether we believe that they actually got 97% of the people, that's probably an extreme. But would they have wanted to become a Russian even if the vote were sanctioned by the rest of the world? I suspect so. The Russians maintain bases in the Crimea since World War II and before that. So that I think does represent the will of the people.
Yeah.
Now, the vast majority. Arguably, on the eastern provinces, it's not going to be that extreme. Although the recent vote indicated 80 to 90 some odd percent wanted to secede in some way, or at least gain more independence. The voting of the wording of the item on the ballot was very ambiguous.
Sure.
And all it really did is said, do you want to gain some independence from Kiev? Now, mind you, the Kiev government itself is, it's a junta. It was formed by a revolution. It was you could say in an international court that it was illegally formed. So
it's a pretty unique situation out there. They were somewhat autonomous, even though the Crimea was already part of Ukraine, but they were partially autonomous by them, and so it's an interesting situation there. I find it interesting. I agree with you. I don't think the U.S. needs to get involved. I think we have so many problems that we're dealing with at home that we need to focus more on that.
It's a red herring that we just don't need to antagonize. We keep talking about the sanctions against Russia. Well, Russia's been putting sanctions against us too. The most recent one, I think, was yesterday, a day before. They said, okay, you go up to the space station on your own now.
Right.
That's a sanction. How are we going to get up there? And they facetiously said, well, you can use a trampoline.
Right.
But we don't publicize that very much.
Right.
We just talk about our sanctions. Look, the last thing we need is another Cold War.
Right.
And another Cold War over a country in which we have no strategic interests.
Right.
What would our position be if the Russians decided they wanted to expand into Mexico? And they wanted to put up bases or form a Mexican-Russian alliance.
Yeah. I
tell you, we would be pretty upset if something like that happened.
Absolutely.
But, to put it in that context, just hands off. We can voice our opinions, but let's not start another Cold War.
Yeah. On the other hand, if we decided to go in and annex Tijuana, that might be another issue. But all right, let's move on a little bit. I wanted to ask you a little bit. Here in our county, here in Wasatch County, we are very, very heavily Republican leaning. I mean, we are very
3 to
red,
4 to 1,
very red county.
By registered voters.
Right. What are some things that you think people should consider about the Democratic Party? What are some things that you think are maybe misconceptions? What are some things that you think the Democratic Party represents that are in line with the people of the county that they maybe don't understand?
Wow, that's
pretty broad. I understand, but just come up with a couple
question.
of things that.
I'd like to come back and say that people should vote on the how they best feel the individual will represent their needs.
Right.
And regardless of whatever that individual has a title for, people should vote based on the individual. I I would like to see less politics, as I mentioned before, at the county level. What is the politics of a pothole? What is the politics of zoning?
Yeah.
What is the politics of a electric or a water utility? Those are not political.
You mean
issues.
our mayor and our city council don't get to decide whether or not we can have abortions?
Exactly. There you go. So, the party really represents, and we can list down, several dozen different things in which you can identify a party position. But I have no clue as to whether a pothole is a Democrat or a Republican. I just don't know. I look at it and I say it's there. There's a problem. Let's elect the best person to solve the problem.
If you're a Republican, you hit a pothole, it's definitely a Democratic pothole.
Okay, well, how can I argue that? But yeah, the thing is, what I would like to see is I would like to see more people that are Democrats stand up to vote to run in elections. We only have there's only one person that we have gotten in a council election this year, and most of the other positions that are open, anywhere from county clerk, assessor, sheriff, and so on. We don't have Democrats that are even running for those positions,
Right.
Because they're just concerned that if they have that D on their name, people are just going to have this fear of a D, and what is that fear based on? And when you get down and you start asking people, what is a Democratic or a Republican assessor? What would be the differences in position on something like that?
Right.
And people saying, well, I don't really know. And I tell you, I don't really know either. So we just need to get less partisan on local politics. And at the state level, okay, fine. There you start getting into land rights, LGBT rights and such. Those start to divide us in terms of what our positions are going to be. But not at the county level, or it shouldn't be at the county level.
Well, that sounds like a challenge to all the Democrats out there. Get out, register, run for these positions. We need to hear what you have to say. We want you out there. We want you running for these positions. Come convince us. Come convince us that you're going to be the better guy, regardless of color.
I couldn't say that better myself.
Yeah,
that's exactly the way we feel.
And I do still personally feel that what we have going on typically in this county right now is we have, and I don't want to say this in a way that sounds offensive or anything, but I think in a lot of ways we have Democrats at heart masquerading as Republicans, because that's the only way they're ever going to get a voice. And so they put an R behind their name, whether they believe it or not, and they run. And obviously they understand that they can't come out and say, well, I believe that we should tax and spend, because they're not going to get elected that way. But when they do get elected, then they do tax and spend. Mm-hmm. And there are certainly lots of different philosophies on the roles of government and how much money we should be spending and how much we should be taxing and how much we should allow people to use their own money. But I think we do have, to an extent, a little bit of a misrepresentation of our candidates right now, who a lot of them aren't really necessarily strongly Republican or
Sure.
conservative or whatever.
Well, I think, and you're going to have quite a variation within parties.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing is that variation. Would a true Democrat bring things more to the left? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Right.
And the voters will have to decide, whether they do want to support more public spending, be it on schools, a pool. You name your local issue, and decide whether that's in the best interests of the community as a whole, versus the interests of an individual to retain his earnings.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And that those are decisions that have to be made. There's certain things that have to be done at a community level. I mean, we don't argue that roads, for instance, are a community function. That you're not going to privatize Main Street or Center Street.
Right.
That they belong to the community, and it is for the benefit of the community. Now, can we say more about things such as bike trails? For instance, I say that with a bit of prejudice, having ridden for 7 hours yesterday on my bike, and I feel it at the moment.
Yeah, I believe it.
But there are things that will enhance the value of a community that I think we should be spending some money on, and we're not.
Right. Right.
But I'll also I can respect the rights. Individuals work hard for their money, and they don't want to spend it on taxes. I moved out here from the East Coast, and my taxes in the East Coast were 4 times what I'm spending on taxes here. So I tell you, rest assured, Wasatch County. In a national perspective, you're not being overtaxed. The question is are you being effectively taxed?
I like that. That's good. Yeah, we, I agree. I mean, you're not going to find anybody that thinks that we shouldn't be paying for a police force and
Sure.
roads and all of the things that we need, public utilities and things like that. But yeah, we just we certainly have to decide, what things are necessary and what things are not, and what things we want to pay for out of our own pocket, and what things we want everyone to share in the cost of.
Right.
And
it boils down to it's a quality of life issue. Is that it's a shame. I've lived and I've worked in many parts of the country, and including internationally. And when you can see things when you've worked in many different places, you can see how other people handle problems. And you bring a different perspective. But when you've spent the whole life just in a community and never left the valley walls, it's hard to understand that there are other ways of doing things, and sometimes they're better ways. Not always, but
Sure.
sometimes they're better ways. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could cherry pick the best of examples that are around us, rather than try to, reinvent things ourselves?
Yeah. I absolutely agree that we shouldn't always have to learn from our own mistakes. I think that's the worst way to learn.
It
has been for
costly.
me. Yeah. I want to look at other people's mistakes and learn from other people's mistakes, and look at their successes and learn from their successes, and recognize that they have something to offer. And I think in that regard, the United States on whole, we need to be a little bit more willing to accept the good things that other places have to offer, and learn from their successes and failures
Sure.
a little bit better.
But I'll take that to the next level, and that is I traveled internationally for about a decade, and have been to 30, 40 different countries. So to not only learn from examples within the United States, but open up our minds and look at how other countries are treating some of the major issues that are facing us. Things such as, healthcare is an example. And saying, well, maybe we can learn something about this. But we have a barrier prevents us from accepting ideas from others, and that barrier, I term that as American exceptionalism. Is that when you believe that you're the best, well, how can you learn from anyone else? Because your belief, not necessarily the facts, but your belief or faith that you're the best precludes you from accepting ideas from anybody else. And this is something that we're falling into this trap of just not accepting ideas from other places because they must be inferior to ours because we're the best. And yet the data, when you look at the facts behind that, and you pick your subjects, and there's literally dozens of subjects to pick from, you say that, well, aside from perhaps gross military spending, there's not a whole bunch of things in which we can truly say, based on facts, that we are the #1 nation. But, and then if you say something like that, and as I'm saying now, often your patriotism is going to be called into question because it's just, well, if you don't believe we're the best nation in the world, you can't be an American patriot. And that is so false. But getting over this hurdle is difficult when you're living in a more crowded society. And I say that I'm calling out Western Europe as being an example.
Sure.
And your borders are closer, and people do travel. And it only takes an hour to get from Brussels to 3 or 4 other countries.
Sure.
An hour's drive in a car.
Right.
You see how other people are doing things, and you can choose the best of those things for your own country.
Yeah.
We're just not doing that.
Yeah. Well, there are good things and bad things to doing things like other countries, and I think we could argue some of the finer points quite a bit of successes and failures of different ways of handling healthcare and things like that.
Absolutely.
And I think that what I would like to see with the United States is that we don't give up the concept that we are exceptional. What we need to recognize is that exceptional people learn from other people, and we've changed this kind of idea of exceptionalism to think, like you said, we're the best, no one knows better than us, and you can't possibly improve on the way we do things. We need to change that attitude and recognize that because we are exceptional, we can change the world better than any other place in better than any other group of people, because we have dramatically altered the course of human existence. But we need to be willing to learn from other people's ideas. We need to be willing to learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes. I think the great business owners, the great CEOs of our generation right now, I believe that they do that. I believe that they or they fail. If you get the CEO of some multinational billion-dollar company and he thinks that there is no one that knows better than he does, that company's going to probably go down. I mean, look at what happened at J.C. Penney.
Sure.
Oh my heavens!
We could
They're
call
almost going to be gone.
Sears.
A couple of years from now, they're probably gone. Sears, probably gone. I mean, they had these harebrained ideas. They put them out there, and they completely failed. And obviously, we don't know how much someone underneath them was either saying, oh yeah, that's a great idea, or they were saying no, don't do this, and they did it anyway. But we have to be willing to receive input and like you said, cherry pick those good ideas. And so I definitely want to have you back on here in the near future so we can talk more about American exceptionalism and all those great things. We really appreciate you being on with us today. I told you this hour would go fast.
It does.
I feel
do
like
want to
it's a
thank
little
you for
too
the
short.
invitation. I think you're running a very fair and unbiased type of program.
Well, that's what we're trying to accomplish. I have my personal views, and I'm not afraid to let those be known. But I feel like civil discourse is the best way for us to learn and grow and progress. And
Essential.
we had it at one time in this country, and we sort of have let it go, and we just beat our chests and raise the banner every time something happens for the team that we're cheering for, and then when the team that we're against fails, we cheer, and vice versa. And it's not a good way to do politics. It's not a good way to run a country. I mean, you can break it all the way down, you can shrink it all the way down into a family. And if you have mom who thinks one way and dad who thinks another, and they're at completely opposite ends of the spectrum, and they never agree on anything, and they never collaborate, and they never compromise,
Not going to work.
it is going to fall to pieces. And that's what we're looking at. I mean, that's really what we're looking at in our country. We need to start, being a little bit, more understanding.
The greatest service that you can offer, and you are offering, is to educate the public on a range of issues.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Wanted to just mention a couple of little things here coming up in the Valley this weekend. We've got Trail Care Day. Sounds like they're going to be getting together and fixing up some of the trail systems on Saturday. Heber Valley Horse Sale is going on. Heber Valley Powwow Dinner to raise money for the powwow is also on Saturday. On the 20th, next Tuesday, they have the Heber Valley Chamber Luncheon. The following Saturday, the 24th, at 9 a.m. at Days Market in their parking lot, Relay for Life will be having a car wash fundraiser. So please come out to that. Everybody needs to get their car washed and support a great cause to hopefully eventually find a cure to more forms of cancer. It's incredible the progress that we've made. I was at a Dave Ramsey thing yesterday, and he talked about one of his employees just found out that their child had leukemia, and that's not a death sentence anymore, and it used to be. And we have made incredible strides in curing some of those things. So a very worthy cause. So please go out and support that. Thank you again so much for everybody listening. Thank you for taking the time to hear what we have to say. Hopefully it's informative. Hopefully it's interesting. Again, thank you so much, Rudy, for being on the show with us today. And again, my name is Mike Hewlett. This is Mornings with Mike on KTMP 1340, Heber City, Utah. And thanks again so much for listening.